Okay, why don't we start with you, Seiko. Peter Cantara was down from Nashville for the retreat, and he's a longtime member of the Nashville Zen Center, and he and I have been practicing together for some time. So just a brief on the retreat.
I found the retreat invigorating and insightful in the sense that although it's called an avid retreat, it's really a training retreat to be a practice teacher. And there are lots of things that need to be learned, and I found this very helpful in reviewing all of the different ceremonies and procedures that are used, and you don't really get that anywhere else. So this was a particularly good experience.
So it's a minor training retreats, and it's true that we're primarily for practice leaders. But if you train, for instance, in giving the Zazen instructions in the kind of abbreviated style that we use, then you're actually learning more about your own Zazen. And so it's open to everybody. We don't restrict the training to those on the formal path. So you can plan to come to August even if you're not a practice leader. You don't have to be a practice leader, but thank you. Thank you. How about you, Anurag? Can you step in a little bit? I don't know if they can we see? Yeah, we can see. We can see. Just speak up a little bit.
I guess, one obvious observation is that the retreat is an opportunity to spend quality time with the abbot and more.
I get too much of that myself.
Maybe true. I guess I would ditto what Peter said. If you have specific things that you want to work on or learn more about, it's helpful to, I think, maybe be prepared with some ideas about how you, because it's a little bit of a self-steering opportunity. So get in mind what you might want and maybe share it with Hojo, ahead of time.
Good, thank you. How about you, Larry?
It's hard to augment that, but I guess what I would say is kind of repeating what you said, Pat. As it is a training retreat, have some thoughts in mind as to what you'd like to train on, and also enjoy the ability to do the fundamental training, work on Zazen for an in-depth study period.
You're going to use it.
Better to duplicate effort than to make no effort. You have to give us your name again. I keep forgetting. Tamam, could you step up here and just make a little testament? Testify. You step in a little bit. There you go.
There you go.
Testify.
Yeah.
Molly. This was her first retreat, right? And a little bit about it. Would you recommend it to others? And for what reason?
And it's a good retreat if you want to meditate for a long time. You should meditate for like 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours at a time. You get good practice in.
Yeah, during one session, the Molly sat straight through, was it for 3 hours?
Like 2 hours.
2 hours or something like that without walking. It was amazing. I asked her if she's some kind of dancer or something. Some unusual physiology. My mother always said women are more loosely put together, so that's a little easier time.
I think it's just nuts.
So Abby was here, Abby Chef, down from Knoxville, where she's at, what's the name of the place, the government joint?
Oak Ridge National Lab.
Yeah. Oak Ridge National Lab. And she used to be at Georgia Tech here. She's a postdoc now. So I think this is your first retreat coming back, right? Second?
Yeah.
You came in February? Yeah, so Abby was also here in February. This is her second retreat after moving to Knoxville. So anything you would tell others about the retreat? Any recommendation for attending?
Yeah, I think I don't want to repeat much, but I agree with the training process, that the fact that I think it was good that there was flexibility and room to suggest what kind of training we want. And for example, we did look at the posture correction and those things which I didn't know about in detail. But apart from that, just the fact that there is something different about long periods of sitting versus what I usually do at home, or we usually try to do at home of like 30 minutes or 15 minutes.
I was thinking for you guys who are on the retreat, um, we came in early this morning and set from 7 to 9, 2-hour sets, 25 minutes with 5 minutes walking each time. And so by the time we go into the Sunday morning, 9 o'clock to 10:30, it's nothing, right? 3 periods of sitting on a Sunday, they seem like a lot to most people. If you've been through a retreat, it's like not enough, right? So anyway, it gives you perspective on your practice, I think, what we're saying. So with any questions about the retreat online, please look at August, the second weekend in August, and see if you might be able to come to that and register online as soon as you can. We have to plan for food and things of that nature. And again, I'm going to try a more extended retreat, which people have been asking for. We'll start Wednesday evening, where you will come and attend the newcomers at 7:30 Wednesday evening. So you'll go, even if you don't know how to sit, you can bring people who are newcomers, who, if they're willing to try a long retreat. And there was actually a young couple, who came to one of Okamura Roshi's retreats. They were brand new to Zen. They'd never practiced before, and they sat through a 5-day, 5 in the morning till 9 at night, 50 minutes of sitting, 10 minutes of walking, 17 hours a day, and they did fine. So
Did they get a badge?
they got a badge, or a merit badge. We should start handing out merit badges. So please plan to attend. Again, your presence encourages others. If you come to the retreats, it's encouraging to the others who can come. If you cannot take Thursday and Friday off, then simply plan to come Friday evening or whenever you can come. Our open door policy is like that. You can join the retreat at any time, you can leave at any time. And we don't want to mess with the money too much. If you have to give a smaller donation for that, we always say, here's the fee, or whatever you can afford. So just work with that on your own honor system. So here we go. We're going to do the Dharma opening verse. It's in the little book if you want to look at it. It's very, very short. The unsurpassed, profound, and wondrous Dharma is rarely met with, even 100,000 million kalpas. Now we can see and hear, accept and maintain it. May we unfold the meaning of the Tathagata's truth. So this may veer a little from the Tathagata's truth today, but Joseph Wiseman is a long-term member now, over a year. And what kind of work do you do? I know it's in IT,
Somewhere, yeah.
somewhere in IT.
Yes.
Yeah. So with that, let me just turn it over to you, introduce your subject and anything you would like to say. You have to sort of look at them and look at them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm trying to divide attention a little bit. So there's a couple copies hopefully floating around. Those are promo copies, and feel free to take one home if you are attracted to it. There are some like very pretty illustrations written by my collaborator June, who's a Vietnamese artist. And yeah, I do have some prepared remarks about sort of like the formation of the work, and it kind of is a Dharma talk, but I was also hoping to do some quick readings. We'll see how much time there is. Maybe also some questions too. But this, yeah, here, let me pull up my notes and we'll step through that.
I'll put the time. I'll deem that maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
No, that, yeah, perfect.
Which 10 or 15?
15. Okay.
We're at 10:55 now, so I will strike the first gong at 11. That makes sense.
Absolutely. So I would describe this talk as sort of being about
You have to face this way. You don't want to turn your back on them. Can't trust them.
okay. So I would describe this kind of Dharma talk as being about awakening the sort of time as a gateway to awakening. And hopefully I'll be able to describe a little bit about what I mean by that. Um, I think the there's this sort of a phrase in this work that comes up a few different times. Um, and I would very much appreciate the opportunity to unpack it with you all. And the phrase is 1,000-year mind. And I would suggest this is a sort of Zen of deep time. And 1,000 years, right? That's a seemingly impossible depth of clarity for any mortals to attempt to practice. But perhaps it's close to enlightenment. So what do I mean by all this? So I think one aspect of this notion, this concept of a 1,000-year mind, is expressed by the reality that our practice, which is itself already very ancient, was given to us by an awakened one who himself points to even more ancient teachers before him. So at the most basic level, I think this is about trying to adopt a mindset of centuries and millennia, not just reflectively and historically, but immediately and individually. So, one exercise for Zen practitioners here might be to try to see our ancestors and our descendants as ourselves. You think about like how old your hand is, right? It's very ancient. It goes back. It's your father's hand, but it's many even pre-human descendants have like this sort of so that this kind of perspective can be enough to jar us out of some day-to-day concerns. And even a minor shift in our sense of time can be enough to dislodge inherited preconceptions and other obstacles to practice, including our heavy sense of time's reality, but also all the specificities of human culture, our ideas about our own limits and possibilities, our social position or lack thereof. So it's truly a healthy escape to pose to ourselves the question, what will this thing that's worrying me matter in a century or 3 centuries? What about after a millennium? So I do think our practice suggests, if not demonstrates, that there is, at least one thing that does matter, millennium after millennium. And we could say that's the art of quiet breathing, but there's other dimensions to that. But this practice, at least it can open on to sort of an overview, like a telescopic operation over our entire life. And it can be a liberation from suffering the passage of time. Because what is real is precisely this moment. So I think trying to find the balance between these ideas of, now being the only real thing, but, the present having deep roots in the past. So I do think that's what the poetry and philosophy in here is like one of the key themes they're trying to pick apart is awakening to what I'm calling deep time.
Did you mention the name of the book?
Yes, it's called Wild Fox and Starlight.
And is this available where they can find it?
It's currently Amazon in that edition. Lavishly illustrated.
Show one of these lavish illustrations.
I'll put a link on the chat.
The link will be on the chat.
So the photography is just like open source, that kind of stuff. But the idea was they were, um, inspirations for the illustration. Maybe in a future edition we'll go back and re-illustrate even more. But yeah, one of the central conceptual themes here is about time, and I think it's a difficult theme to capture. I say here it's like the moon on the water. You can't capture it in your hands. It's a limit of articulability. And
Limit of what?
at the limit of clear articulability.
Articulability.
So Dogen has some interesting things he says about time, about, today flows into tomorrow, but it also flows into today. Um, so
Classical, by the way, was said to have anticipated Einstein's relativity
absolutely, no, there's something like very profound in what he's saying.
analysis of time, the nature of time, as if there is such a thing.
Well, right. So yeah, again, time.
Don't let me get you off track.
It's so fine. Like, yeah, again, I think these remarks are interesting, but I'm not sure how clear some of them are. But so I say here something like, awakening to time is like the moon on the water. You can't capture it in your hands, but you can map it, you can compose it. But trying to capture it in literary form, you hear this in Zen sometimes, it stains it. It stains the awakening to try to capture it in letters. We do find Zen in the moonlight at midnight. And do we not sit just like we're keeping a vigil? So I say here the Dharma is just like a vital constellation. It's a cosmic matrix. It's a perfect companion to the moon. And like it's trying to talk about the starlight, right? But I ask this question, doesn't Zen ask us to reveal an inner radiance in which we disappear as separate beings to show forth our own clear luminosity so that with practice we can learn to reside in it? How can we really drop away body and mind, leaving nothing but clear emptiness beneath? An emptiness which is paradoxical to us since it is full of light. Shunyata is maybe a bit like creatures in the dim depths of the sea, those sentient beings who create their own light, shining at the bottom of everything. When I write in here about the obstacles to enlightenment of fatigue, of exhaustion, of stress, these are very real factors. They are lived intensities, important feelings that Zen can help us catch sight of. And over, I do feel like the practice has taught me to see and study myself more carefully, more clearly, and encourages me to take care of all sentient beings, to let go of things without losing myself, to guard my spiritual energy carefully. But, just to say I had to process a lot of things, intellectually and emotionally, just to get to a place where I could use the practice in a simple way to get in touch with myself. And so in that sense, this book was important for me to write. If only to straighten some things out in my own practice. But I did want to pull out that, this idea of 1,000-year mind is what this book preaches. And tries to offer deep time not as an escape from the present moment, but a deepening of the roots of the present, which depends on so many causes and conditions, and it stretches back into a beginningless past. So despite the unreality of time, it can be an important gateway to awakening, I think is the upshot there. But let me quickly try to say a few words about the wild fox, which has its roots in Japanese folklore, and the persistence of this figure, from mythology and into the public Zen cases, it testifies to a close relationship enjoyed by pre-industrial human societies with the natural world. So in the koan, in the public case, a stranger presents Master Baizhang with the carcass of a fox, and tells him a very strange story and asks for monk's rights to be given to the dead animal. Now, I'm going to try to avoid interpreting it too carefully. I do want to, koans are intended people you want to discover the sense and the value of these stories for yourself. But hopefully, I can at least kind of expound a little bit around the edges without taking some of that away. But so again, a stranger comes up to Master Baizhang, tells him a strange story. He tells him that he was once a teacher, like ages ago, but he made a mistake and so was doomed to rebirth as an animal in the body of a fox for 500 years. So what was his mistake? Um, this teacher transmitted the Dharma incorrectly. He said that cause and effect don't matter for enlightened people. Um, and what folly this was, right? This doomed him to rebirth for half an age in the body of a fox. So we could say the fox represents a danger for anyone who would preach the Dharma, which is distorting the essence. And as we said before about literature, language sort of makes this inevitable in a certain way. But it's no excuse for disrupting the transmission of the teaching. So without interpreting the fox, we can say maybe that in letting, you know, mind and body fall away and letting the signs and organs disappear, there is a normal causality that is reversed, but it is impossible to say that causality goes away for the enlightened. Um, the depersonalization can't mean ignoring karma. So denying causality denies something like the core tenets of the Dharma in a number of ways. Also ascribes some fundamental difference between the enlightened person and the ignorant person, which, we are all ignorant in many ways, right? Um, you know, so maybe another dimension of the fox is he's just a representative of the natural world. And there is an important way in which nature is a way into Zen, which, depending on your point of view, can be seen to favor a certain kind of poetic romanticism about the cosmos. But at any rate, I've drawn from the fox a sort of inquisitive character who, asks various questions of other mythopoetic figures, like starlight and darkness. But it's important to recall that there's an expression wild fox Zen, and this could be considered pejorative in a lot of contexts. Just we should be somewhat thoughtful about this. So because it can again, this teacher was doomed because of a mistake he made, right, in teaching the Dharma to become the fox. So it can signify cleverness, but also ignorance in other dimensions, possession of an incisiveness that nevertheless doesn't penetrate to the marrow of the Dharma. Just as the story with the academic who asks the Zen master for his own kind of turning word. He's too puffed up with his own, imagined wisdom to accept genuine instruction from an equal. But who is free from ignorance so that they could hold others in judgment? In enlightenment, there is no you or me. So Zen shows us a path taking us beyond self-centered ideologies, but also beyond our own subjectivity, beyond even our names and faces. The Dharma preaches the transcendental equality of all beings, which is why we wish them all future happy lives and full liberation and light. So reflecting on my year of Zen practice, I recognize I'm fairly new to some of this. I feel I should tout and talk up the many benefits of meditation, but what was sort of coming to me as I was writing this was kind of how critical it is to emphasize the importance of how we come to the practice. We are fortunate to have heard the Dharma, to have had human births, to have had such good teachers and friends on the path. The Buddha himself emphasizes the vital importance of companions in spiritual life, not only because they will encourage you, but because the Buddha himself finally comes to us simply as a friend, offering us a seat. And if you keep him before your eyes, your practice cannot go far wrong. So I really do want to thank everyone in this community for their contributions, because everything in this text ultimately flows from this sangha. It's really my gift to you guys in a certain way. So I'm very thankful for the opportunity to practice with you and to share a little bit of my thinking today. I do have some readings from the text I could do. Hesitant to take up too much time, but maybe I could zip through.
Let's see if anybody has a preliminary question
Yeah,
at this
that's
point.
good.
Anybody online have a question so far on what Joseph has had to say? I know that was a dose, but maybe something stood out for you. There we go, Kushin.
Thank you, Joseph, and all of you gathered. Really appreciate the words, Joseph, and your lovely discussion to promote us to be involved, not to just be listeners. I just wanted to bring something that's near to me into your discussion. I live in Montana and have for 33 years. And we have, and this is getting to a question to see if part of your reflections may have included this or not. We have 8 recognized Indian tribes here in Montana, and tribal members are okay with people saying Indian or Native American, whatever pleases you, but they're comfortable with either title. But it's well known that most tribes always think about actions they take as affecting 7 generations to come, much like you're suggesting in this discussion of the koan, which I think is a really gracious opportunity for us to, like you say, begin to at least experience that process and how it may affect us. So I just thought I'd bring that into the conversation and see if that cosmology that you speak of also had a reflection from this perspective that's been certainly ongoing for many generations. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jim. It's a beautiful question, and I do think the sensibilities are quite congruent. I'm not sure I have a ton of deep insight into Native American cosmology, but I mean, I just to elaborate a little bit, I think in Zen one of the puzzles is, only the present moment exists. So when we talk about future centuries, future millennia, I mean, it's just to say it's also the case that the birth and death are also somewhat illusory from a certain point of view within Buddhism. So it's not simply that, oh, I'm going to be dead in 7 centuries, right? I think there's a strange puzzle of like, what if I were alive in 1,000 years?
What do you mean, you white man?
Well, no, it's sort of a good point, right? It's like, our descendants who will inherit this earth, why do we think of them any differently than than ourselves, right? I don't know. I'm not sure I have a particularly deep thought
I
there.
have one of that. Those ancestors of old were as we in the future shall be, Buddhas and ancestors. Back to your original theme of 1,000-year mind
Yes.
in the Xinqing Ming, which again we'll be going into in the next master class. Toward the end, he says, kind of dismissively, he says, emptiness here, emptiness there. But the eternal universe stands, or infinite universe stands always before your eyes. Infinitely large, infinitely small, no difference, for definitions have vanished and no boundaries are seen. And it's kind of an infinity and eternity kind of welded into one, where the perception of time that we have as linear and limited is challenged by our time on the cushion, where somebody said the barriers of time and space fall away in Zazen. I think of it as entering back into real time from clock time. So anybody in the room, we can sort of trade back and forth this way. Any comment, question?
Can you tell us what the point, or rather, just right, not what the point is, but where did what was the motivation and what's the purpose of the book?
Sure. So one of the, like, at least the foreword does speak a little bit about the formation, and we can dive into that. But so I would say there's a combination of a few different kind of voices in here. There's a kind of a series of philosophical reflections. There's some poetry, but I mean, like the most obvious dimension of the formation of this text is not to blame it on poor sensei, but as a writer himself and as a skilled mentor to other writers, I think that was the sort of ultimately the genesis of this was sort of just a few brief encounters with sensei was enough to send me off writing. That wasn't, and I don't think it involved. I don't know. I'm not trying to talk about a mind-to-mind transmission or anything, but like there really was just a few quick interactions, and then it a lot of the questions I had come to Zen and to the Dharma asking were kind of, again, just lucky to have had a good teacher who put me in a position to ask some questions of myself and a kind of, wanting to get some things straight in my, for myself is probably the sense of this at some level. But yeah, if there are other questions, I'm happy to take them. But the preface might hopefully at least tries to describe what brought me to Zen and to writing. If sorry, if that would work. All right. So it's the preface to the first edition. What could this humble practitioner have to say to you worthy cultivators? Which is a fair question, right? So I say, what is writing about an awakening, if not returning to the ancient teachers? If anything escapes from these pages and is brought forth into the wide world, I sincerely hope it is nothing but the genuine wisdom of the sages, which is undistorted and like a polished mirror. Spiritual awakening is like nothing else quite so much as the reflection of the full moon on the water, which perhaps brings us around to the question again, what brings me to Zen? So then, what brings me to Zen? But the answer is the path and the indescribable beauty of the Four Noble Truths. What else then besides dukkha? Whatever brings sentient beings to the clear and inconceivable way of the Buddha, if not dukkha? Better ask also what brings Zen to you. And what brings Zen to me is Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Because we rely on Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, it is like we are surrounded by innumerable radiant spirits, and like the ancient sages are running with us. Because the infinite light of the Buddha's compassion flows towards sentient beings at every moment in time, there is nothing like the present moment, pouring into itself like water into water, resplendent with the jeweled flowers of the spiritual and natural realities. There is nothing like just this and nothing but just this. For the whole world is like one bright flower in the Tathagata's hand extended in response to our question. No inquiry into the nature of the whole world is possible without the wisdom of the sages, or without the present moment, or without the nature of mind being clear, vast, empty, and free, just like the sky. Say just like the sky tonight, because I wrote it down. And there is a poem here. I'm going to read a brief poem. So, what brings me to mean Zen? What brings Zen to Zen? Mind. And what brings mind to mind? Vast and deep like golden sky, pure as starlight, cold and bright. What could it be? Nothing but mind. And what brings bringing to bringing? That is brought out by Zen, which brings us back in. And what brings back bringing back? Just like a wild fox, you already knew. Nothing but mind. So I'm not sure how super clear that was, but hopefully something of an answer to your question. And I do have some commentary, sort of commentary on Dogen's commentary on the public use of the Fox, which we don't have to get into. I know we're creeping out 11:12. And this one is, well, it would take a little time to talk through it, Sensei, so maybe we'll hold up. But sorry for this long.
I was remembering another line a little closer to that, to the 1,000-year mind from Shin Ming. And like, come into harmony with this reality, just simply say not to. In this not to, there is neither self nor other than self. No matter when or where, enlightenment means entering this truth. And this truth is beyond extension or diminution in time and space. In it, a single thought is 10,000 years. That's the thought I want.
It's the good thoughts.
So that was online, that was in-house.
That was in half.
Joshua. Online. Oh, Ishirio's. Is that your real hand or is that
No, these are my real hands.
how do you know?
Get them all, well, I'll line them up and one of these things is not like the others when I look.
I thought as an evolutionary biologist, you would chime in on Joseph's comment about how old your hand is.
There are many points for study here, Joseph, and I thank you for the presentation. Sensei and I have discussed this for a long time, and the first thing that I thought of when you spoke of 1,000 years as being deep time, those of us who are evolutionary biologists would think of 1,000 years as like that or less.
Absolutely.
And that we do in our study of Zen, we will talk about Dogen being located at a particular, between this year and this year, on the scale of thousands of years. But as a working, I mean, as of something that I like to think of myself as fairly intimate with, we're talking deep time is not thousands of years, but it's hundreds of thousands of years, and it's millions of years, and it's even billions of years, and we're still talking about living organisms. Jim, I think, was talking about the Plains Native American, if you're on that side of the border, First Nations, if we're on this side of the border, where there is the very common convention of think of things in terms of 7 generations. Well, we know as a matter of historical fact that Native peoples arrived in North America on the order of 15,000 years ago, which again, on the way that we usually think about things, is a very long time, and the way that we think about other things is not very long at all. And going off on a tangent is that I frequently introduce my lectures on human evolution by saying that humans are really weird. There isn't any other species that has the evolutionary history that humans do. And as Sensei knows, and anybody that wants to look at my acknowledgement to the Sangha, I've just gotten a paper out on bees And while listening to Joseph, it occurred to me, well, that what do bees do that we like? Well, they make honey. And how long have they been making honey? Well, they've been making honey conservatively 800,000 years. And so that is their karma, is to make honey. Something that bees can't do is sit on a cushion and put their hands in front of them. They might be able to do that, but I don't think they'd reach. And we would go to our human lineage and how long have we been able, why are we able to sit Zazen? And we are able to sit Zazen in the manner of Dogen because we are apes and we are bipeds and our hands are free. And so we can assume the position. And we also have the advantage that we have arrived, if it is an advantage, that we've arrived at a condition of self-awareness. And then we think about what are the other co-inhabitants of the ecosphere that are given intelligence, and whales, the cetaceans. And it is not too difficult to imagine cetaceans, if they're not already self-aware, I'm sure that they are self-aware. Would whales realize Zen?
I think
And
you're going to stop so Joseph could say something less than universal.
yes, it's I was struck by deep. What do we mean by deep time?
Sure, Steve. So I didn't really have time to get too much into it, but I would say the other dimension besides the deep time of the natural world is the deep time of cosmological time. So, you know, a key referent beside the wild fox here would be starlight. And it's actually kind of curious from the perspective of a photon, time doesn't pass at all. You can cross the entire infinite universe and the photon doesn't experience time from its own point of view. So I would say deep time like can even curve back around on itself to where an infinite amount of time doesn't even seem to pass, even though it was.
An instance of time at the shallow end of the pool. What would that be?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's our heavy leaden, you know, sense of time's passing and like us suffering its passage and like trying to release us of that. I think maybe one of the keys. I don't know, but
Okay, John's got his hand up, and then we'll come back to the room, see if we have two in the room, because you had two on screen now. It's unfair.
Joseph, can you hear me? Thank you for your talk this morning. Very stimulating. This concept of time, the construct, the deep time. I encountered a young evolutionary biologist, and I hit her with my quick understanding of evolution, in that we managed somehow to crawl up out of the slime, start breathing that oxygen, which was revolutionary, and then drag ourselves out and finally stand up and start walking around, covering, thousands of years. She said, John, let me give you another perspective. If the beginning of life was put on a 24-hour clock, humans arrived in the 23rd hour in the 57th minute. If you lay it out from the beginning of life, we represent the last 3 minutes. I've been processing that ever since. I welcome your response, Joseph.
no, I'm not, I'm not sure I have a particularly apt one, but I mean, certainly it seems to argue against the idea that we're the center of existence, right? But
We're not.
Yeah.
I did a little experiment, which I invite you to try for yourself. I put my 80 years on a timeline, in decades, because my life seems to have made major shifts virtually on the decade each time. So born in 40, there's a big change in 50. 60, I went to college. 70, I moved to Atlanta, et cetera, all through the life. And then I shrunk those 80 years down to and put those on an 80-year timeline. And so you go back another 80 years, anybody born or 80 years old when I was born in 1860, Civil War. Anybody who was 80 years old when they were born was born in 1780, Revolutionary War. And I looked it up online, and sure enough, there's an 80-year cycle theory of history in the United States, that every 80 years there's some sort of cataclysm that happens. That, and this time it wasn't a war, but it was Trump and COVID. And then I put it on a 100-year timeline going back to the Shakyamuni. So if you color your bars on the Excel spreadsheet yellow, you can see the first, the whole thing is yellow. It's all your life, and then you shrink it down, and you see it's this little bar here, and the years are going back. And you shrink it down, it's this little tiny yellow bar over here on the right end, going back to Shakyamuni. And you put in the key dates of things happening there, and you begin to see. It's humbling, but to say the least.
And we don't learn.
We don't learn. You say, I don't learn, or we
No,
don't.
we don't. Humans.
Well, we relearn and relearn and relearn, right?
But that's the point of the 80-year cycle. We don't learn. We keep doing the same crap.
Right. When will they ever learn? Okay, that was 2 online. See if we can conjure up 2 in-house. Peter's got one.
Yeah, very nice talk. Yeah, it's thought-provoking. But everyone talks about long time. What about short?
Can you tell them what you do for a living, or what you're?
Oh, I'm a chemical engineer. I'm very analytical, but I go to small spaces and short times rather than universe and limitless time. And going from a nanosecond to 1,000 nanoseconds, the relative change is like 1 year to 1,000. Okay, so I mean, a nanosecond is less than a blink of an eye. 1,000 nanoseconds is less than a blink of an eye. So how can we say that 1,000 years is somewhere out there when a blink of an eye, it could be 1,000?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this timeline, everyone looks big. There's also a small. How small can time, an element of time, be? As small as it is large.
Yeah. So minute it enters where there is no gap. So vast it transcends dimension. This sounds very scientific and modern, but if you read Dogen, I think it's Hosu Badaishin, which is the establishment of the Bodhi mind. Dogen goes into this long trip on time, and he says the smallest particle of time, the smallest duration of time, is kind of like the Planck constant in space, the smallest measurement of space. Smallest in those days, the smallest particle of time, he expounded as the Buddhist theory of instantaneousness of the universe. It's even difficult to say. And so he goes into this analysis to say that in the snap of a finger, 1 snap of the finger, not 2 snaps, is not a moment, is not a part of a second. That's a very long time. But in 1 snap of the fingers, they had to be like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these shana. K-S-A-N-A is the Sanskrit term. That's the smallest particle of time, smallest duration. Then he calculates how many must be in a 24-hour period, and he comes up with his 8-figure number. So this is not exactly modern. This is a known issue. It goes back. Yeah.
But our whole concept of time is based on 24 hours, our perception of a day of time.
Yeah.
So really, we have no concept of time on a universal, galactic, whatever, however you want to, like the Eames did with you zoomed out and you zoomed in.
Right.
But I mean, so if we met another life form that has a different set of time
We might be moving very fast in their eyes,
or very slow.
or very slow.
Yeah.
At the end of Xin Qing Ming, he sort of throws up his hands in frustration. Words! Exclamation point. The way is beyond language, for in it there is no yesterday, no tomorrow, no today. Now we're sophisticated, we've gotten off the planet. We can see that what we call today is just the shadow of the earth rotating, right? So there is no such thing as a day. And we know that. We're sophisticated. They didn't have that. They had that in, they had to get to this intuitively.
I have a question for you, Sensei.
For me?
Yes, for you. When you talk about, when you mention Dogen referring to the smallest unit of time, are you suggesting that there is a base unit of time, that it's not empty all the way down?
Well,
Turtles all the way down.
turtles
Turtles all the way, right?
turtles.
Yeah.
Actually, he goes on to say that this theory says that in every instant, meaning this micro instant and time on your scale, everything, the entire universe arises, abides, changes, and decays every instant that way. So that it's the refresh rate of the universe, just as a reality, just as you have a refresh rate on the monitor. That's why we can see people instead of seeing the raster. The frequency on our nervous system is keyed, tuned into this. So vast it transcends dimension, but a hair's breadth deviation, and you are out of tune. The reason we can tune into this like a radio dial, you don't get static, is that our frequency is tuned into this frequency. So they're establishing this as the fundamental frequency of reality. Every other frequency is a resonance on that frequency, but it's moving so fast we cannot perceive it. It's not in the realm of perception.
So to speak metaphysically, you're suggesting that there is a base, indivisible unit of time at some such
I would say frequency, not unit. Unit is too particular. Is it? As a musician, you could pick it down on that level.
I would argue against that.
Yeah, I would buy that.
I would argue that there is no base, because we are basing everything on our experience here, which is arrogant.
Well, the model of time in Buddhism, as I understand it, is emergent. It's not linear. It's emergent. Each moment is emergent out of the past moment.
Right.
And none of them are disconnected, and yet they're all discrete.
Right.
These things can be true at the same time.
At an absolute level and at a relative level, arise, exist, and pass away.
Right. Not based on any sort of.
Well, he goes further to.
Not an absolute, but maybe a relative.
It happens, and therefore it happens and it ends.
Yeah. As Dogen always does, he pulls us back together by saying, if this were not true, enlightenment would be impossible. And the reason is you would always be stuck in your karma. If everything did not change on this instantaneous basis, we could not be liberated from past karma.
I do have something. It's a question on, it would fit here because it's a little bit related to time. So it seems like so for example, what Laurel mentioned about 24 hours, like our conception is like that. It seems like we make that conception because our lifespan is like that. So like, because for us, 80 years, 90 years, 100 years, but like that's the lifespan. So like, that's how we scale time. Like that's how we see what's too much or what's not. So basically, like, and is all of it rooted in somehow being able to being able to do things within the lifespan, or being able to bypass, or like afraid of death. Like I don't like how is, that's why all of this time, like, is time emerging because of the fact that we are essentially wanting to avoid it.
I mean, we certainly like put marks on a clock so that we can try to capture it. And I don't know. Like I think there's a.
That's where midlife crisis comes in.
Well, right. And no, I mean, anyway, I'm not sure how to fully respond to that, but like I do think we can see time as like a blank rolling of the hours, or an infinitely rapid creation and destruction. And like, and so yeah, I just like, I mean, I think the one of the most terrifying things is just the irreversibility. Like time for us only flows one direction. So like, I think that's what we know about, reality, is that, causes and conditions flow forward into new situations. And I think, acknowledging the reality of that seems to be also saying, oh, there's birth and death in the world. But that's only an appearance, says the Buddha. So, I mean, yeah, I think it's like, how do we get beyond a heavy sense of our impending doom and you know, a thing you'll hear in Zen circles sometimes is that, well, if 80 years of life is good, then 1 year of life is good, then 1 day of life is good, I'm not sure how to say it much more. Yeah.
So if anything about deep time can be tied to this thing.
I'm not sure how to necessarily respond much further, but no, it's a beautiful question. Yeah, I think it's an open question. Like, how do we? Ultimately, that would be it. It's like, how do we recognize the sense and value of the time that remains to us for ourselves? I think would be the. Yeah.
Fortunately, Dogen speaks to that, and I can recite a little bit of what he had to say, and that will be in a future master class when we move into Japan. But I can't remember which fascicle it is. But he said he does this wonderful analogy of firewood and ash to illustrate time. He says, firewood becomes ash and does not become firewood again. But do not suppose that the ash is future and the firewood past. Firewood abides in the phenomenal expression of firewood, which is something fully includes future and past and future, and is independent of past and future. Ash abides in the phenomenal expression of ash, which fully includes past and future. So he flexibly flips future and past and so forth. Then he goes on to say, just as firewood does not become firewood again after it is ash, you do not return to birth after death. As a whiplash, I guess, takes no return, right? So he says, as this is so, it is something way in Buddha Dharma to deny that birth turns into death. Accordingly, birth is understood as non-birth. Then he goes on to say it's an unshakable teaching in Buddha's discourse that death does not turn into birth. Accordingly, death is understood as non-death. And he says, birth is an expression complete this moment. Death is an expression complete this moment. They're like winter and spring. You don't call winter the beginning of spring, nor summer the end of spring. So it raises the question, if he says birth is an expression complete this moment, and death is an expression complete this moment, an expression of what? So I would simply say life. It's an expression of life. So death, birth, and death are presented as equal but different inflection points in the continuum of life. Here's the continuum of life coming on. Here's a birth. Here's a continuum of life. Here's a death. And it continues. It's like Ungan's favorite metaphor of the ocean and the wave. The waves are the inflection points. The ocean is life. And this was backed up by Matsuoka Roshi when Bill Cooper gave a talk last week, and he mentioned it. I asked him about this incident. He was leaving Matsuoka one day. He lived with him, and he said, Sensei, when I die, and Sensei Matsuoka said, you don't die. You don't die. But you have to challenge our assumptions about birth and death and the continuum of life. Remember, they did not have clocks in those days. At most, they had
sundials, maybe a water clock, but those were
maybe
pretty
burning
rough
rolls
days.
with knots in them,
Right.
Nobody's got our hands online.
Okay, Suchita has her hand up and then we'll go to Lindy. Or Lindy first. Yeah, Lindy first.
Thank
And
you. Um, Joseph, thank you for your talk. I love it when community members, Sangha members give talks because it's great to hear where you're coming from. And, you know, I remember it was a year ago, February, I believe, Valentine's Day weekend, when you shared some excerpts from this book. So I'm glad that you've developed it into this, and you truly are a wonderful writer. I'll be brief and just say I've thought that your analogy of Shinata to bioluminescence in the deep ocean is absolutely brilliant. And I'll be taking that to the cushion. So thank you.
Thank you, Lindy.
taking it to the street. So any response to that?
No, thank you so much, Lindy. It's a very beautiful thought.
I have a question for Lindy. Where is he coming from?
Everywhere, all at once.
So Suchita.
Hey, thank you so much, Joseph, and everyone else. There's a scientist, I don't know if you all have come across him, but Donald Hoffman, he's physicist, something mathematician, and he and many colleagues are doing, I guess, analyses, and he says that space and time are human constructs. You know, with mathematical equations to go along with some of this. And I just wondered, so what does that mean? I guess, is that like beginningless time? Maybe there is no time, but anyway, just thought I would share and see if anybody has any thoughts. Thank you.
Space and time are human concepts.
Yeah, I'm not a theoretical physicist, so I'm not, although I do think we have people with physics sophistication in the Sangha that might have deeper insights into this. My understanding is that, you know, the human conception of time has been, you know, over the decades sort of picked apart into different kind of elements, some of which are emergent and others of which, you know, I think the idea of an underlying persistent reality of time independent of anybody to perceive it is, at least, I think there's enough paradoxes in formulating that it's hard to come up with a clear answer. But like, that's more metaphysics than physics probably. But
I think it's a good exercise, thought experiment for us to try to go back in time and imagine what it was like before we had these concepts. When we're sitting here in retreat, we start early in the morning, and because the earth is rotating and nutating and so forth, it's dark at different times in the morning and then gets light at different times in the morning. We tend to experience this, the Zendo is very dark in the morning and it gets lighter, and then in the evening it's lighter and it gets darker, right, as we're sitting. And you're sitting very still, so you notice this. It's almost like you can see it. I was sitting on a retreat outdoors where I had a tree in front of me in the shadow of the tree, and I swear I could see the shadow moving, like a sundial. I could see it moving, sitting still enough for long enough. So you have to go back to, there is no yesterday, today, yesterday, tomorrow in the Chen Ming, and beyond language. Why did he choose those three terms? So if you imagine 300,000 plus years ago, here we all are, we're out in the belt or out in the plain or out in the jungle, and suddenly it's getting dark, and we say, what the, what's this, right? And then what, 8, 12 hours later, it starts getting light again. What's this? You know,
You go to sleep and then you wake up.
you go to sleep and you wake up, but it gets dark, it gets light. What is that? You know, they have to say, well, let's call it today. You know, and didn't this happen before? Yeah, let's call that yesterday. And what about when it's dark? Let's call that night. You know, that you had to come up with something. I mean, this is one of the first things you had to create language around, right? Because you had to be able to talk to each other about what we did yesterday and what we're doing today and what we need to do tomorrow, right? So you had to come up with that very early in the game. But when you get off the planet and you see those are just made up terms, that ain't really happening. there's only one day, right? If it's a day, there's only one.
Well, and sorry to jump in,
Oh,
but we age differently when we're not in a 24-hour cycle.
That's right. They did an experiment in California, put people underground, no daylight. Everybody reverts to a 25-hour circadian cycle,
Almost 25.
almost 25.
And same in the space lab.
So that tells me that as we evolved, there may have been a point at which the Earth was turning more slowly, right? Would have to be more slowly to be 25. Maybe. Well, we're only one planet. Anybody else online? I've been falling down on my job on the gong. It's about 11:50, almost 11:55, so we'll be wrapping up soon. Any closing comments, Joseph? You got
No.
about 5 minutes.
Thank you all for the opportunity to share this stuff, and yeah, please, there's a couple copies floating around that are promo. Please grab one if you're curious about it. Anyway, thank you for that.
Is your contact information in there?
It is not. It is. It's pretty. It would be pretty obscure to try to work out. So because it's not even published under my name. It's under a Dharma name, under Floating Cloud. So in order not to attract merit to myself, hopefully, but I think.
Cloud is our family name. So it's fair. But
So-
you're willing to give your email to somebody?
Absolutely. No, if anybody's curious or wants to get in touch, happy to share that.
Anything else on? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
1 year of practice and writing a book, that's pretty impressive.
Absolutely. I mean, so I sort of come to this more, formed as a writer before I had encountered Zen to some degree. So, but
I quoted him, I thought, this could not be the result of 1 year of practice. So he's merit from past lives, like me. If we don't know, it'd be a prodigy. Just don't let it go to your head. Okay, online, last chance. I can't see all the
I would
names.
like to say in Zazen, we use gongs and bells and clackers to designate time. With words, we use wild fox and starlight.
Yeah, yep. Anybody else?
That's Bill. That's
Here we go. Angan.
I'd like to say hello to Abu, hello, and tell
Hi.
everybody it's almost time for my nap, so I'm glad we're shutting down.
Okay, let's close with the 4 vows. They're in the book if you're not familiar with them, and we do them 3 times, so they're pretty easy to pick up. Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Illusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Illusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Illusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it. So thank you for your patience and listening. We're going to invite everybody here present to join us for farewell lunch at Tycoon. Too bad you're not here. You don't get to go to Tycoon for sushi and what else? The Thai food. So, but thank you for attending, and please look into your future and see if you might be able to attend one of these retreats in future. They're going to be longer, but the Zazen gets even better. The Zazen might not be very good, the Zen, but the food is always good. And thanks to Anrak for being Tenzo this time. If you want to be Tenzo for a retreat, you don't pay the fee. So I see that drew a bunch of students. Gasho, take care.
You're just paying in another way.